London are afforded the opportunity of making some personal contact with a special architectural scene in Russia. The drawings and engravings upstairs in the bar and members' room are already familiar to some of you. So too is the context within which our visitors are working or not working, as the case may be. Thanks for this are due to Catherine Cook, assisted by Jonathan Charlie, who provided a splendid series of lectures describing the destitution of Russian cities immediately post-World War II and the various stages in which reconstruction and further destitution have been carried out. We can now appreciate that official Russian architecture, and the context in which it is conceived is almost, but not quite as bad as it is in the West. Great Britain is no exception in this respect. So we already have a glimmer of insight into the motivation of a generation of architects who have been developing a culture of fantasy, imagination, and craftsmanship, which we have here dubbed the nostalgia of culture, and which may perhaps provide an avenue which other generations may or may not take up. A catalogue meant to be available for a grand closing of the exhibition at the end of next week is now at the printers, with contributions by Catherine Cook and Brian Hatton, and quite well illustrated. Alas, by then our visitors will of necessity have left prematurely. Of necessity left prematurely. And we regret that next week's program has had to be cancelled. It was a program of talks and jury attendance. The procedure tonight will be as follows. Mikhail Labazov, who was born in Moscow in 1961 and is a member of the Art La the Art La group, will refresh our memories about the range of work under discussion. He will show us some slides with commentary. The rest of the party includes Alexander Brodsky, who spoke to us last night, and Ilya Utkin, with whom he works. They were both born in Moscow in 1955 and graduated from the Moscow Architecture Institute in 1978. Dmitry Bush was born in Moscow in 1958 and also graduated from the Moscow Architecture Institute. Totan Kuzembayev, born in Arisa, Kazakhstan in 1953, and he too is a graduate of the Moscow Architecture Institute. Ivan Shulman, born in 1959, graduated from the Institute of Engineering and Construction, Novosibirsk, in 1983, is a member of the NAS studio in Siberia. Andrei Cheltsov was born in 1959 and, like Shulman, graduated from the Institute of Engineering and Construction. He was also a member of NAS and the Art La group. After Michael Labazov's short talk, there will be a moment's confusion while the arrangements for the panel discussion take place. I have invited a half dozen people from the various walks of life of the AA to make comments and ask questions as they please. And it is my hope that the group of 7 will mount the platform and endeavor to respond as fully as possible. Tom Nugent, a graduate of the AA and a Russian by birth, will act as translator when the going gets rough. The 6 panelists include Catherine Cook, who's a lecturer at the AA, frequent lecturer, and at the Open University, Charles James, Brian Hatton, a critic, and a member of the staff of the General Studies unit downstairs, and Nigel Coates, the unit master of the AA, long-standing, and Yehuda Safran, a critic and member of the General Studies Service unit. It is my intention to end this evening's discussions after 2 hours, and it's my pleasure to invite Michael to begin.
these slides can help you to understand the context in which we are living, our environment. The next page. This is a very typical landscape, and this is the map. Only with such map you can orient in such situation, because houses are different only by their numbers. Next, please. So you can see members of we can say circle. Here Tatan Kuzimbaev, Igor Pishukevich, who is unfortunately not here. Then they and the next, please. Here you can see Mikhail Khazanov, Dmitry Podnyapolsky, Alexander Khomяков, and Mikhail Belov. The next, please. Here you can see two projects by the group by Dmitry Bush, Dmitry Podnyapolsky, and Alexander Khomякov. The first slide is this is a project which was made for competition of Soviet architectural journal Architecture of USSR, and the term was the second dwelling of citizen. And the second on the second slide you can see a project which was made for Japan architects competition. Как назывался? Glass Tower. The next. Старик, а это к чему было сделано? Тоже. This one was also made for Japan architect and also for this competition. And the next was made for also Japan for Shikenshika competition. A cube 1,000 to 1,000 feet. I think all is understandable. No comment. Huh? Next, please. The class in the archive. Поздно. This is I see. This is projects by Mikhail Belov. The first by Mikhail Belov and the second by Mikhail Belov and Sergei Barkhin. You see, this one was made for Japan competition. The image of the bridge of the future. It called bridge through the Rubicon. And you can see that you can't easily pass this river. You first of all you go forward, then return, then and so on. The next, please. The first slide. On the first slide, you can see the work which was made in Sakabe. It means Architectural Bureau of Architectural Students Bureau of Moscow Architectural Institute. It was made for the style of the year of 2001 and was connected with the real city and was made for real situation. This is in Moscow, in the region of Nagornaya Street. And this is a reaction on our typical environment, typical situation, which was made in constructivist stylistic. And the second slide shows, you can see. The next, please. Старик, ну что делать? This... Слушай, старик, я, понимаешь, я это не знаю, эти вещи. These two slides were made by a group from Tatan Kuzimbayev is, and he's now here. Maybe he'll try to explain it for you. Tatan, на русском, переведет.
This is a dwelling complex for youth, and it's for 6,000 people. The idea is to create more human environment.
По-моему, тоже, по-моему, нормально было, а? Ты расскажи, что ситуация, что заказчик, когда узнал, увидел это, решил, что это просто нереально. The next, please. The next. Давай, вот по поводу информационного города. The second. На втором слайде.
This is another project which is Information City, and it's for one of the places near Moscow. This is a real project, and it's a commission which hopefully will be built.
The next.
So on the right-hand side, that's sketches of the towers, which is called a tower of an agitator.
The next, please.
On the left-hand side is a street, and on the right-hand side is a bus station for this development. A monument to Lenin is on the left, with red lemon, and the Tower of Time is on the right-hand side. Next, please. So, this is also for the same project. On the left is the street of the Information City, and the right one is... The street is connecting to town square.
Очень широкая улица, метров 60 шириной.
It's a wide street, about 60 meters wide.
Типовые такие вот 14-этажные башни, 8 штук. И с другой стороны просто 9-этажки стоят. Просто улица пустая, вот там никто не ходит. живет.
That's very, very empty street. It's an existing street in this outskirts of Moscow. But these new structures, the new elements which create this non-human environment.
Мы поэтому решили здесь создать какой-то такой другой масштаб, там не такой очень несколько таких масштабов, приблизительно к человеку.
The idea was to create several different scales in this environment.
Да, здесь мы сделали несколько улиц, создали клеть улиц, сейчас с этой стороны есть улица просто.
So there is several layers of streets in fact, along this wide existing street.
И еще дополнительно к этим 8 башням, мы здесь поставили штук 20 разных башен.
Они сейчас будут идти.
There is a proposal for several new ones.
And the next, please.
Ну вот это фрагмент.
Fragments of the development.
Вот тут один.
On the right hand side is the proposal for one of the new towers.
The next, please.
Ну это фрагмент этого информационной башни.
A pedestrian plaster is on the left.
Башня гитара, это собрана вся информация, которая касается политики.
And an agitation tower is on the right with all the political messages on it. Next, please.
Ну, эти две башни, одна называется вертикальная оранжерея, или вертикальные сады. Здесь вот собрана
The vertical garden is on the left.
вся информация, касающаяся такого экологического.
So it's an exercise in ecological design.
А это вертикальный музей кукол.
On the right is a museum of dolls, a vertical museum. Next, please. This is the model of the Tower of the Agitator.
С Пушкиным наверху.
You've seen before.
С Пушкиным наверху.
There is a famous Russian poet Pushkin on the top of it.
The next, please.
Next, please.
Following these slides shows you works of Mikhail Filippov, who unfortunately also is not here. This, the left one, this is a project which was made for our Moscow competition for Kropotkinskaya Street. It was the question was what we can see on the place of destroyed building. You can see it on the top of slide, because this is a circle, and Filippov answered that we can see only a square there, only a yard, and we need only to make good relations of its environment. The next, on the right side, this is a proposal for Japan architect competition style for year of 2001. And you can see that he is a classic fan. He thinks that classic architecture is only right way of further development of architecture. The next, please. Here, two another works by Filippov. The right is this is one proposal for Japan architect competition, the house atrium, space of atrium, and here, как назывался он? This is aquarium. The next, please. These two slides, on these slides you can see two pictures from also his project, which he executed for competition, museum of sculpture, museum for sculpture. You can see a museum in the center of slides, and in summertime it is winter in it, and in wintertime it is summer. And you see, this is Leningrad tradition that sculptures which are staying in parks of Leningrad, in winter time they are putting in box, usually in boxes, wooden boxes, and so he proposed another glass box for them. Next, please. His paysages. The next, please. Also, his works. Next, please. This is a model of our friends Sergei Lobachev. This was a proposal for central one of the central squares in Moscow, for Pushkinsky Square. It was put on, I think. Что? Something wrong?
Someone just put the push.
Да. On the top there is a theater. Town theater. The next, please. Here you can see work collage by Alexander Zasimov. Usually he uses he uses well-known masterpieces in his works, so you can recognize Italian painting, a fragment of Italian painting in the top of this work. And this is and these are Russian peasants and field, and so typical landscape. Next. Yes. This is a monument for cosmonaut.
Что?
Space monuments. Next, please. This one is also by Alexander Zasimov. So he reproduced
Что?
he reproduced famous Leningrad square near Zimny Dvorets, and this the right one is a work by Sergei Chekulov. It was made for the Japan architects competition, style for the year, not style, monument for the year 2001. Next, please. So here you can see members of another group, Alexei Krupin and Alexei Miroshin. On right side you can see a project what they made for intelligent market. So this is box with empty heads, and if you have some problems, you can change heads. And this is on the left side. You can see the real project for university in Ulaanbaatar. This is in Mongolia. Next, please. This is also this project for Mongolia. The next, please. Here you can see another group, Art Blia. These are two members who are now not here. Vladimir Turin and Andrei Savin. And on the right side, this is a project for intelligent market done by Vladimir Turin. Next, please. On the right side, this is landscape. Как ты назвал его? This is a landscape which was called Town Number 3. And on the left, you can see on the left side, this is Town Number 4. The next, please. These on the right side, you can see Andrei Savin's proposal for an intelligent market, and this project called Time Tower was made by Mikhail Abazov, Andrei Savin, and Vladimir Turin 3 years ago. Next, please. This works. So on the left side you can see Japanese house, a contemporary Japanese house, and on the left this is an architectural art museum.
Стоит комментировать?
The next, please. This you've already seen, and this one called Genius Lossy, unfortunately upside down.
Что?
Next, please. This is a proposal also by Art Blia for Doll's House competition. The next, please. This is proposal for competition water design. This is a house with water pool as an atrium with level of water on the level equal with the level of your eyes. Next, please.
Бред.
This one was made for competition for Islamic architecture, which was called dwelling as a reflection of yourself. The next, please. And on the right side, you can see a proposal for house for today, for AV, which developed the same principles as Islamic project. Here you can see works by Andrei Chertsov. Next. On the left side, you can see his work on contemporary Japanese house. The next, please. This on the right side. This is Andrei Chertsov's painting, and this one is the work by NAAS. This is a water station. Next. On the right side, another variant of water station, and on the left side, this is Andrei Savin's proposal for dwelling in historism and localism. The next. This is on the right, on the left side, you can see Alexander Brodsky and Ilya Utkin proposal for John's house, and on the left, this is Khodnev's, Vladimir Khodnev's project for competition, for Kropotkinskaya competition in Moscow. It is a theater with a roof, looks like park, perspective park. Yes. And this is some old objects.
Что?
This one was made for conference of Soviet cinematographers. Next, please. On the left, Belo's project for the second dwelling of second house of citizen, of citizen, and it based on
Как называется? Танцуем от печки. А?
On the right side, this is first slide. Then you can see two last. This is a simple wood plate, and the next, please. Then it was cotton, and these cotton pieces were curved, and chair appeared. So this is design on the work of about wood as material. The next, please. This here you can see Andrei Chertsov's son with material, and this is some objects for conference of Soviet cinematographists. The next, please.
That's all.
Да, я это понял. А ты понимаешь, ну,
Расстрел. Ребята, а что это? Извиняйте. Хорошее слово.
First of all, I'd like to thank our Russian friends for their presentation that might work kick a ball or two into the court to be kicked around further. My experience of this work when I was asked to review it and survey it, at first was of great confusion. A mass of material arrived. Some of it I'd seen before because it has been getting exhibited. It was some of it was at the Milan Triennale in September. Some of it was at La Villette recently. Nevertheless, when the portfolios were opened, it took me quite some time to begin to sort it out, because a good deal of it didn't really correspond at all to one's cliches about Soviet architecture. I think it's now really a long-standing sort of cliche that people think they know what modern Russian architecture looks like. They go for their week to Moscow, they seek out Golosov's club and Melnikov's club. They think it's all constructivism. So, obviously, one had to think twice. And having thought twice, and maybe three times, it seemed to me quite clear that as the lid is taken off Russian building after a period of about 30 years, in which one could really only speak of building and not really of architecture, that there's a whole kind of, let's say, a Pandora's box of diverse tendencies and possibilities underneath that seem about to come out if they're not already out. And I think, I begin to wonder really whether our Russian friends who have over the last few years had such a struggle really to express themselves, to find recognition, might not find themselves in a year or two actually faced with a possibly more difficult problem, which is not the common struggle, as it were, against the programs, the builders, the people who want quantity and not quality. I mean, in that they've been united. They're all friends. We saw some slides of them. Is this working? Yes. We saw some slides of them. Seems to have gone down. Suddenly. We saw some slides of them together. It's a world that they've showed in Moscow. A world that perhaps a rather bohemian world. Parties. There's a picture out there in the bar called The Ship of Fools, and they're all sat round the table, seemingly have a rather good time to themselves. But it seems to me quite likely that within a few years they're going to be faced with a different situation. I think they will be asked to build, just as people who 10 or 15 years ago thought they would never build. It turned out that they were building within a few years. And at that point, I wonder if they may be faced with a new kind of question, which is their own differences amongst themselves. Because looking at this work, it's quite clear that it's not merely diverse, but it contains potential conflicts, contradictions. Let me perhaps try to point out one or two. In the first place, we might note that some of the architects we've seen tonight seem to want a kind of return to the heroic days of early constructivism. We might call that back to the future. But on the other hand, perhaps you noted that in the drawings of Filipov and his partner Brontsova, that we had expressed in a rather beautiful and delightful way. I must say, I find it far more delightful than the nostalgias of Quinn and Terry. A dream which we might call forward to the past, rather than back to the future, as it were. Because one of those drawings, I think it's called A Style for 2001, is a very serious proposal for what I take to be a whole series of 5-year plans which would return Russian cities to the appearance of what they looked like around about 1820. Now, I'd just perhaps like to end this reminder of the diversity of this work with a question to our friends, which is, are they really able to agree with each other beyond the simple platform, really, of a common opposition to the problem of the being rejected up to now by the state builders?
There are as many opinions as many architects in the scene in Moscow, and these architects who are presented today also have different opinions and different approaches.
Он сказал, согласны ли мы? Между собой.
Да.
Согласны ли мы или нет? Мы согласны. I think it doesn't answer.
Yeah, but nevertheless, despite of the fact that there are different opinions, there is actually at this stage there is an agreement between them to be together. So that's the answer, that they actually agree between them at this point in time. All of them are very good friends, and nevertheless, when they actually come together, they don't discuss architectural issues. So they socializing, discussing different things.
Каждый отвечает после.
Ну еще подбросьте еще какие-то ответы.
Несмотря на то, что мы какие-то разные, общее направление изменить эту ситуацию, которая существует однообразная, мы пытаемся изменить, и в этом мы согласны друг с другом. Наши действия, они получаются совместно.
Это сложный вопрос.
Because we try to change real situation in the Soviet Union, we agree with each other. It's a very important point, agreement. But I think it's we agree with each other because if you feel that it's creation, it's not question about style, which language you use. It's question of creation. And if you feel that it's real creation, you should be agree with this. It doesn't matter, constructivism or it is work of Filippo. It doesn't matter, really. For me, it's my point.
Well, to be honest, I find that a little bit too easy to get off that point, because it is a bit more than stylistic difference, isn't it? If one person is proposing to build mega blocks using concrete and steel, and another person is proposing really to demolish those blocks and replace them with planks.
Why? It could be in any case it could be creation. Why not? It just depends on time, on right time. If it could be in the right time, that's okay. Что, один может демолишь, а другой дом, а другой может не демолишь. Нас заставляют разговаривать на тему архитектуры, что мы никогда не делаем. You push us to speak about architecture, and we never speak about it with each other.
Well, I wonder if this is actually a kind of symptom of the problem, because you know, really, for all that one, it might seem that you have been in a difficult situation. There's another sense in which the situation you've been in has been actually rather protective. You know, to have a private conversation in a courtyard can actually be quite comforting, and it seems to me that the so-called title of this work that you've been doing over the last few years, Paper Architecture, which I hope we will now see the end of, because I'm sure it's obsolete, nevertheless conveyed a situation which enabled certain differences to be, as it were, literally papered over. And you're now really perhaps in a situation where you're no longer bohemian.
Отношения между идеями, между идеологией. Я не понял вопрос.
Вы хотите сказать, что как бы, значит, раз как бы есть непримиримые противоречия между реальной архитектурой, может быть, да?
Я потерял, да.
Но между как бы вещами, которые не реализуются, как бы,
Это конференция класс.
между ними может такой борьба, да?
Вопрос не, я не понимаю, что это.
Более конкретно.
А ты говори в микрофон по-русски, и я буду переводить. Как лучше?
Давай,
Мы
давай.
совещаемся, это нехорошо. Давай. Просто по-русски скажи фразы, и я буду переводить. Хорошо? Говори, не важно. Ты говори, что связанный разговор. They...
Ну давай я просто скажу фразу.
Right, okay. Ну говори, не важно, не попадешь, не важно. Попадешь, не важно, просто выскажись.
Мы выражаем свое отношение к жизни как архитекторы.
We express our attitude towards the life as architects,
Которые владеют искусством рисунка, но от них уже не зависит окончание их проекта.
who are skillful in drawings, but who cannot actually control the realization of the projects.
Это отношение к жизни.
And this is attitude to life, so that it ends on the drawing board, and that's the end of it in itself. At this stage of the development of this moment, let's say. That's perhaps why the title paper architecture is so appropriate.
Поэтому и проекты различные, потому что каждый из нас художник и какая-то своеобразная личность.
And the projects are different because each of these people are different characters and is an artist with his own attitudes.
I'd like to ask you a question about the paper architecture, which is this. Most of the projects that I've seen have been responses to competitions from Japan, but certainly from outside the Soviet system. And in some cases, the titles of those competitions, I think, directly express capitalist conditions. I mean, for instance, there was a competition which you entered called the intelligence market. The intelligence market is it's a nostrum which one might associate with radical capitalist thought just now. It probably comes, for instance, from the capitalist theorist Friedrich von Hayek. So, the question I'd like to ask is this. The question I'd like to ask is this. To what extent has the work that you've produced for these competitions expressed your idea of the competition and its Western, its capitalist setting, or to what extent it really expresses your own problems and your own situation?
В какой степени в ваших проектах вы ориентируетесь на программу конкурса, на тему конкурса, то есть подлаживаетесь под тему, и до какой степени вы выражаете свои собственные мысли, независимо от того, какая тема?
Такой сглаженный перевод, да, Баз?
Нормально. Говори так громко, как
Competition theme is only provocation for самовыражение. Тема конкурсов как бы провоцирует на самовыражение.
The programs and briefs of the competitions are only pretext for the expression of the ideas which have more general level and not actually addressed towards only because of the theme of the competition. They exist separately. That's the answer from Mikhail.
Это провокация к деятельности.
So, this is a provocation, well, this is a pretext, as I said, to the action, the brief. But idea is already there. Perhaps it's an interpretation towards the theme. It's catalyst. In fact, the themes and briefs of the competitions are actually catalysts which help to express these ideas, which are already there.
Многие из этих проектов могли быть сделаны и без конкурса. Просто нет.
Most of these projects could have been done without competitions, or without a briefs of the competitions.
Just example, not couple, a lot of projects. They have done for one competition, and after they didn't win, and after they won other competition, second and third. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter what's title of competition, because it's example style of for future. It was competition for first reason to do it competition. It was Russian competition club club for city, and it just reason to think about our society, our life?
Well, my impression is that one is that perhaps two different interpretations might be placed upon this. On the one hand, it seems to me that your work seems to reflect the common experience of an overbuilt and under-designed, actually, in the true sense, metropolis. Many of the projects show life as your work in response to the common experience of anonymity, anomy, and the lack of place, the lack of identity in the big city. Now, you might say that is worldwide.
Многие проекты имеют отношение к такой безличности в городе, то есть анонимность такая.
One or two of your works seem to me to express, with great originality and wit, an experience of the competition's briefs, which reflect your own lives in a communist world. For instance, the project by Miroshin for the intelligent market.
С одной стороны, проекты выражают такую анонимность как бы существования в городе в современном, а с другой стороны, они относятся к реальностям социалистического как бы города. Я не совсем понимаю, о чем говорит.
And the project by Brodsky and Utkin for the Forum Mille Veritatis, because there it's referred to the competition of the intelligent market. But what we see is a forest of columns with small personal ads on those columns.
Да. С одной стороны, вот такая анонимность, а с другой стороны, как бы какие-то личностные такие индивидуальные черты. Значит,
and that's a common form of, it's a small expression of the market in Russia, because I've seen those columns where people stick small personal ads, and people go up to the column and they read the ad, and somebody's selling a pram or a second-hand record player or something.
То есть это действительно как бы социалистического такого бытия вот с этими обменными.
And that image springs directly from your own life.
То есть это пришло из вашей такой жизни реальной в городе.
Yes, of course. Well.
Подожди, вопроса нет. Нет, а вопросов нет. Brian, what is the question?
Well, I'm trying to find the point at which you become critical, as it were, because many of the projects seem profoundly ambivalent. On the one hand, they seem to relish the experience of the overbuilt metropolis. On the other hand, they withdraw from it. Many of the projects convey a sense of the sublime in that sense. It's a simultaneous horror and pleasure.
Brian, that question is going to be answered over a period of time. Thank you.
Не, ну отношение к городу как бы его интересовало.
I don't have any question. Random thoughts on disconnected ideas in a way. The nostalgia of culture is the Greek phrase or the Greek word nostalgia means a longing or a wishing to return home. Perfectly valid wish, which over time becomes associated with sentimentality and turns into so many people's view into a reactionary sentiment. But we know that at times sentiment and reaction can be very powerful and be very creative. I suppose the most well-known example of that is the French Revolution, which was a revolution made in Roman dress and Roman with Roman symbols to revive, to go back to a homeland that, of course, was never French and probably didn't exist in the first place. But it was very powerful and very creative. And in that sense, I think the nostalgia of culture, the two words nostalgia and culture, have been, for all of you, very radicalizing in a kind of ironic way. And it recalled to me the words, the actions of that group, those two Russian painters from the 1970s and still painting now in New York, Komar and Melamed, who those of you in the audience may not know, but became quite famous maybe 10 years ago and are now selling their works of art in New York City at the Feldman Gallery, which I understand is going to exhibit your work, so you may see your future behind you, selling for a great deal of money. But Komar and Melamed created in the 70s, 1972, a thing called Sots art. Sots art was a mixture of pop art and social realism in a very kind of ironic bisociation of those two movements. And what they did, while they were painting heroic, social, realistic portraits of conventional subject matter such as peasants on tractors, they suddenly got the idea of painting their friends, their family, their home in this manner, and took socialist realism out of its heroic and corporate state guise and applied it to the everyday life. And then they appropriated pop art and Andy Warhol, as we've heard tonight, Andy Warhol being appropriated several times, maybe unintentionally, maybe intentionally, I don't know. But there is a very interesting, ironic displacement of other traditions. And as with Komar and Melamed, you never know if they're affirming something or satirizing something. They're sending up classicism and pretentiousness at the same time. They're affirming the eternal values and the autonomy of architecture. As a style, and the style we saw last night in the film, there was a kind of awfulness to the style. A kind of bad architecture, like bad painting, and bad painting, of course, as a movement, was formalized by Komar and Melamed. It's meant to embarrass us slightly, and it does embarrass us, the classicism, the pastiche, the send-up. Partly because it's so self-conscious. And they asked, or I think Brodsky asked, is it postmodern or is it classical? We've been asked. And he asks and didn't give an answer. And of course, in a way, it's neither. And we must kind of decode what it is. It asks the question, it asks to be classified. What is it then, if it's not something that has pre-existed in our culture? And it seems to me, when you ask that question, you come up with a conclusion that the style and statement that you're seeing here are, and vividly in that film, is a kind of individual portraiture, very clearly themselves as lions. I don't know how many appeared as lions with their mouth open, or on tops of columns, or as a herm or a caryatid, or as a hermaphrodite. But what was clear was it was portraiture of some kind. And in that sense, clearly a kind of radicalizing of an individuality, as they said, against stagnation, or the phrase that is now popular under Glasnost, against the period of stagnation, again, against the Brezhnev era, but of course against the system of anonymity, and ultimately, as they pointed out, death. Death holds a fascination, I think, in their drawings and in their architecture. And stagnation and death are equated with the system. And in a sense, their portraiture is a strike against that. It's a kind of very primitive statement of the person against the system. And so when we look at it, we have to think ironically, even if we affirm it ourselves, by having them here and talking about it and admiring it, we have to think that, of course, with Glasnost, and everybody brings up Glasnost and Perestroika in this concept, in this context, that Gorbachev himself now is affirming his power through contact with foreign countries as his situation in Russia gets more and more tenuous. And clearly, if the economy is collapsing in Russia, as it appears to be for so many people, the way to sustain Gorbachev's position and Glasnost is from the outside. And I think that adds a completely different dimension to what we're seeing here now and the meaning, the possible meanings of this work. It's not really a question.
Не вопрос. Это не был вопрос. Это просто был разговор.
As was revealed by my first interest in constructivism, the burning question when first walking into the rooms where the exhibition is held are to do with where does it all come from?
Откуда это взялось? И откуда такая живость, энергия в работах?
But as one begins to become familiar with some of the techniques and the characteristic images of the exhibition, of course, it's inevitable that one compares what you see to what you know already. And thank goodness for the Shinken Shipu competition, which seems to have been a very important vehicle for a lot of you to actually put down your thoughts on architecture. And I find it curious that a lot of the entries for the Shinken Shipu competition are remarkably similar to what a Japanese architect might have done, or even a student from the AA or people associated with the school.
Многие ваши работы очень похожи на то, что сделал бы японский архитектор или бы студент из архитектурной ассоциации.
So one says, hooray, you are all participating in a kind of international culture of architecture.
И это выглядит как будто такое явление, часть международного движения.
And they're executed with an exquisite dimension of graphics that I think is as strong as anything that's produced in this school.
Сделано на очень высоком графическом уровне.
But perhaps the origins of that work are to be questioned.
Да, но вопрос, откуда они берутся, эти работы.
There's of course the tendency to requote constructivist architectural images in the work.
С одной стороны, это как бы занимается из конструктивизма какая-то.
And also to stress the nature of the architectural monument as an expression of architectural culture.
А с другой стороны, это как бы памятник, монументализация, да, как часть культуры.
And a concern with what it seems to me is an affirmation of the feeling of architecture, the joy of participating in architecture for its own sake.
И это как бы радость такого участия в архитектурном проектировании просто ради проектирования, искусства для искусства.
That this dimension of nostalgia that Charles was talking about seems to be a recuperation of the sensation of architecture as an activity.
То есть это как будто бы архитектурное как бы проектирование часть жизни. Или, там,
and I can see certain parallels, as I spoke with some of you today earlier, with what it felt like to be working in architecture here 10 or 15 years ago, when there was very little actually being built in the city.
Да, и он сравнивает опять ситуацию в России сейчас с 70-ми годами на Западе, когда мало строили очень.
There's an interest in poetry and what Alvin called the fantasy, imagination, craftsmanship triangle.
Да, тут много очень поэзии и.
But in all this, one wonders how it's going to move forward. How you've just caught up. Clearly, it's very much to do with the circumstances that you're in now, and more generally, the position of an avant-garde.
Да, но вопрос, куда вы двинетесь дальше и какова позиция как бы авангарда.
But you can't get away with it just by saying that this is paper architecture and it is for us. The question arises in my mind, who is the audience?
Да, вопрос не просто как бы дело не для себя там рисовать и положить в стол, а вопрос, для кого это делается еще.
And one does not know whether the audience
Кто потребитель.
Is the Japanese reader of Shinkanchiku magazine,
да.
or the AA, or the global
японец, который читает этот журнал, или там ваша бабушка, кто это вообще, кто потребляет это?
And if what you're doing is really worthwhile, as in a collective sense, and here I stress the fact that you're all here together in one exhibition, diverse as the work may be, but it's one exhibition. How do you see you're addressing the audience, developing from doing drawings for yourselves or for one another?
Да, каким образом вы видите свое отношение к широкой публике, делая картинки для себя фактически? Вопрос, это вопрос, отвечайте.
Yeah.
Да, ну,
Ну, это сложный вопрос, конечно. Да, в первую очередь мы... Нет, даже не знаю, кого в первую очередь. Делая эти конкретно эти картинки, которые... Если это вопрос к нам с Ильей, потому что я могу только за нас отвечать в данный момент.
I can only say about our work. So it's not a general answer, it's just specific answer from these two people.
Когда мы делали эти конкретные картинки, которые висят сейчас на стенах,
when we did this particular drawings which you can see on the walls in the exhibition.
Ну, в первую очередь мы делали их для себя, потому что мы хотели выразить какие-то мысли, которые
Primarily we were doing these pictures for ourselves.
Затем мы делали их в расчете на своих друзей, которые понимают нас, мы в этом уверены. И в-третьих,
secondly, we did it also for our friends who can be the critics of our work. So we were orientating our output towards people close to us.
И часто для конкретных друзей, которых мы даже иногда изображаем на этих проектах.
And sometimes for very specific persons who could be sometimes seen on the drawings as portraitures.
И во-вторых, это, конечно, члены жюри японского Шинкеншику, которые, как нам кажется, чем-то напоминают наших друзей.
And thirdly, we did this project for the jurors at the Schinkenschicke competition who reminds us some of our friends.
И затем уже, естественно, это делается для всех остальных, кто имеет возможность это увидеть каким-то образом. Но главное, чтобы эти работы нравились.
And fourthly, that for anyone else who can see these drawings. So that's the answer.
That's
Yes,
the answer. Well, I was talking about the future, really, and what happens next. Are you going to continue to be satisfied with that degree of fulfillment, or?
После этого, ну хорошо, вы нарисовали, а дальше как? И какое будет отношение? Для кого вы будете делать?
Если ситуация будет такая же, как она и была до этого, то все будет продолжаться по-старому, очевидно.
Нет, я думаю, что нет.
Здесь я могу еще сказать вот, то, что я показывал.
Нет, они пусть докладывают. Just one second.
Невозможно, естественно, сказать, что будет дальше и что будет через 5 минут.
It's impossible to say what's happen in the future, even in 5 minutes time.
У нас есть мечта что-то строить.
But we have a
мы никогда от
dream
нее не отказываемся.
to build something, and we never forget this dream.
Yes, but I don't think I'm necessarily talking about proving your point by building things. I'm talking about a degree of understanding of the techniques, the avant-garde strategies that you've already employed. And I've suggested that the avant-garde strategies you've used are those of extricating architectural entities, architectural products from the context of the living city that you're part of.
Он говорит об авангардной стратегии и том, как влияние, которое в ваших работах, они приходят из города.
Да, то, что город нас имеет большое влияние, именно город. Да?
То есть как вы это будете реализовывать дальше? Авангардную стратегию, которая есть в ваших работах в дальнейшем?
Я не могу сказать, не могу ответить на этот вопрос. I can't answer.
Well, I think you must be careful, but of course, my opinion about what happened in let's say, theoretical architecture in the West is not necessarily the same as everybody else's, but I was particularly suspicious of work by people like Massimo Scolari, who wanted to put little wings onto architectural monuments and let them fly away into imagination. And I'm afraid that there's a tendency there that may just disappear into insignificance. And one sees such energy there that it seems a pity that a strength of vision in architecture can't then be made even stronger by pushing it back into the circumstances that you actually live in as part of the city. You were talking about trams and snow and all that earlier on, and no doubt there are many other things, but I don't think to design a new piece of, let's say, theoretical internationalism and then inserting it into a Russian square as a new commodity is necessarily what's going to give rise to a real progression in the culture of architecture in Russia.
Очень сложно вообще. То есть он говорит о том, что то есть он против того, чтобы архитектура, которую вы делаете, как бы она там отказывалась от решения конкретных проблем в городе, в современном обществе. И поэтому он хочет знать, а как вы будете относиться к реальной жизни, ваше отношение к реальной жизни, проектов, которые вы делаете.
Это станет ясно, когда что-то изменится. Мы не можем заранее программировать что-то, и никогда этого не делаем, стараемся этого не делать. Пока 10 лет назад мы не имели возможности не только строить, но и делать эти конкурсы, то есть отсылать эти конкурсы
Много не говори, трудно
за границу.
Много не говори, сразу трудно говорить. Ну хорошо.
Well, I'll try to speak English to be faster. We never make programs for a long time, even for. We try not to make them because it's senseless for us. And your question, I can't answer because I don't know what happens after some time, and I can't. And we are waiting. And at the moment when something happens, I'm sure that we'll do something. But it's impossible to say, yes. And for example, 10 years ago, we had not only had the possibility to build something, but we also had the possibility to take part in such competitions. It's not very long ago that when we began, only 6 years, and before this, we were watching this competition in magazines without any hope to take part in it, and then this possibility appeared, and we began to do it because it was some way for us. Now time passes, and I think, of course, we want to do something more in the town and to build something, but I can say that if tomorrow I can believe that we can lose the possibility to do this competition tomorrow. And so I can imagine the moment when we sat at the table and began making only little pictures or doing something, some ювелирные изделия,
Jewelry.
Yes, something with art within it. It's not very much different for us. Different what to do. We like architecture, but we can't waste time to wait when we can build something. We want to do something every day.
I'll just end with a purely personal reaction to the whole show, which is that I find those projects that deal with landscape and many fragments in a landscape, I find those projects much more interesting than those that stress exquisite isolated objects.
Он находит значительно более интерес в проектах, которые относятся к ландшафту, скорее, чем к изолированным отдельным предметам.
Because they're the ones that contain that dimension of the energy of the city
То есть
implicitly.
это то, что несет в себе энергию города.
Нет, вот смотри, а ты первый скажи, что просто лучше...
Нет, спокойно, не так надо делать. Вот.
Я не знаю,
Когда он задает вопрос, да?
Nostalgia is not
Высказывайтесь один за другим и говорите прямыми ясными фразами. Тогда я могу переводить, иначе получается путаница.
I was in a hurry because I was going to disagree with Charles Jenks' interpretation of the word nostalgia, which seems to be rather important for this particular group and perhaps the context in which they're working. Because nostalgia is not the wish for home as much as the pain for nostalgia from Brodsky last night, which is in fact, to my mind, the moving aspect of the work, is when he said at a certain point, when I was beginning to think that the English, this kind of English must inevitably be difficult and perhaps he would not be able to hear. And then he said, what we hope for is to be able to wish nothing and to need nothing and to desire nothing. And at that point, I thought that I had a sense of what could be home if there is any such thing in the first place. Because I think that what seems from the outside perhaps a disadvantage, it's perhaps the greatest advantage they have or have had was precisely being left to their own devices, as it were, free. Nevertheless, a couple of Italian visitors yesterday, looking at the exhibition and reading the title, immediately commented, "What a great misery." In other words, to wish for culture, or to see in culture a remedy for this nostalgia, for this pain, seems from rather more saturated or Italian position a punishment, or a form of accepting a punishment. So, is it between the Scylla and the Charybdis? So what is this song that we are listening to? There is a song, I seem to hear it, otherwise I would not accept the invitation in any case. But it is a song under a great danger. There is a passage about the middle of Natscha Mandelstam book, Hope Abandoned, when she, Hope, Natscha, was abandoned, when Mandelstam was taken away and never returned. She recalls fragments, she recalled the whole culture that sustained itself without a paper at all. Can you just translate the last two sentences from Mandelstam onwards? Please.
Could you repeat them, please?
Painfully, but not without gladness. She recalls in the middle of Hope Abandoned, the second volume of Natscha Mandelstam.
Мандельштамовская поэма «Надежды нет».
She recalled, as she does everywhere else, the period in which the entire culture, or what was culture for her and her colleagues, being entirely committed to memory, without papers at all.
Значит, культура, которая для нее и для ее знакомых, она без бумаги совсем.
Does it surprise? Is it something?
Не требует бумаги.
Культура, которая внутри не требует бумаги.
Am I quoting? You know the book? Is it the? You know the book?
I don't think they know the book because I don't think it's been published.
A lot of things have not been published in Russia, and they are very well known.
Значит, культура.
However,
What is the
don't
question?
worry about the. Yes, we come next. And when she recalls it, and that she does often, she particularly, at that point, thinking of a poem by Akhmatova called Conversation with Dante.
Так, она говорит о разговоре с Данте. У Ахматова. Так, знаете, да?
But she recalls only two sentences from that poem.
Да, она только вспоминает две строчки.
And the second one.
Вторая строчка предложения.
And what if the citizens voted for a renaissance?
Что если граждане выбирают ренессанс?
All that will happen will be cafe renaissance.
Все, что случится, будет кафе ренессанс.
I think that your choice is between acknowledging her sentence or falling into cafe renaissance. Good luck.
И ему кажется, что ваша работа это относится к афере Ренессанс.
Получили по мозгам, да?
Ну что, ну протестуйте против этого. Скажи.
Ну, лично для меня ситуация заключалась в том, когда я делал эти работы, что
Personally, for myself, I can tell you when I worked on my project.
В условиях, когда я не мог ничего сделать в реальной архитектуре,
In the situation when I couldn't do anything in the real architecture, real building,
я хотел хотя хоть что-нибудь сохранить в себе.
I wanted to keep something in myself.
Это был единственный путь, как выразить себя и что-то сохранить в себе вот во время в этой ситуации.
And it was the only way actually to express myself in that situation.
И как только появится ситуация сделать что-нибудь в реальности,
And if the opportunity will arise to build actually anything, something,
я не сделаю больше ни одной работы на бумаге.
I wouldn't do anything on a paper as conceptual project. I would actually turn into the real design of the real buildings.
Для меня выполнение вот этих бумажных работ это была единственная форма протеста против ситуации.
So the working on this paper architecture projects was for me a form of protest against the impossibility of building anything.
Можно мне сказать одно слово
Ну,
на
давай,
эту же
да.
самую тему? Вы все видели выставку и наши работы.
You've seen,
И, может быть,
all of you seen hopefully the work on this exhibition.
И не думаете ли вы, что некоторые, может быть не все, а может быть многие из этих листов способны существовать сами по себе и быть
And don't you
произведением
think that some of this project could actually exist on their own rights as pieces of art, as they are, without any other ends?
И может быть это какой-то новый способ, ну, какое-то новое искусство, может быть. Есть разные виды искусства, а это еще одно.
And maybe this is just another form of art. There are different forms of art. Maybe that's just a new one.
What is better, to do art on the paper or to do bad building? Да. Yes. It sounds excellent.
Ты сказал, что если хорошо нарисуешь, то хорошо нарисуешь.
Так, давайте послушаем сейчас.
No, yeah. I would like to ask you, after all, one rather particular question. I'm very struck going around the exhibition by one theme, which I see there in two works, but they are works by, I think, people of quite different orientation. One by Brodsky and Jurgen and one by Charmin.
Одна тема ее интересует, определенная.
Both of which express a great skepticism, even dislike, of a situation which is rich with information, of an information-rich society, of computers, of that kind of state. Может быть, я?
Да.
Я вижу вот в две проекта, в особенности, которые стильные, вот совсем, как я понимаю, людьми, которые имеют совсем другие должности, интересы и так далее, именно вот Бродский и Шармин. Это скептицизм относительно вот мир информации, против компьютеров, против ситуации, где есть очень много много информации, но вы спрашиваете, вот ваш проект для Intelligent Market. Зачем нам нужна вот эта информация? There is this, I tell you, strong theme, particularly in a scheme by Brodsky and Jurgen and one also by Schmitt, which to me is interesting, as I'll explain to you, which is a terrific skepticism about an information-rich society, against computers, asserting the view that we don't need a skin scheme. You learn more about the world by one conversation with one person than from all the information in computers. Что для меня интересно, это что у вас ситуация в СССР, где с перестройкой, гласности и так далее, вы хотите увеличить количество информации, которая распределяется, сообщается внутри ситуации. What's to me interesting is that they are in a situation with glasnost and perestroika where information is the key commodity, if you like, that they are trying to increase the circulation of. That's exactly what it's all about. И там я вижу вот этот скептицизм. Что это значит? Это значит, что, может быть, вы не хотите. Я вижу там немножко славянофильское, может быть, отношение. Что есть дух в России, которому не нужна вот эта информация, этот западный вот объективизм. I see, я даже не I see there something which is in a way, I wouldn't say sinister, but I didn't quite say that in Russian, but in a way to me is redolent of the 19th century attitude, which is again raising its head, of slavophilism, which is to say an actual pushing aside, a skepticism and an enmity towards the objective things that are available through the West, a belief that Russia has a spiritual mission in the world, which is perhaps higher, better for the world in a moral sense, than this Enlightenment obsession with objective information. And when I see that written up there on those projects in the present situation of the Soviet Union by people who are looking to the future, I wonder whether there isn't some kind of equivocation then. Но это для меня интересно.
Почему скептицизм в наших работах по поводу информации, хотя в Советском Союзе идет время гласности, перестройки и так далее? Я могу ответить на этот вопрос со стороны своего проекта следующим, то что на самом деле не вся информация добро.
Not all information is benign information, he says.
Потому что если вся толща информации сваливается на одного человека, он не в состоянии в ней разобраться, он в ней тонет. То есть каждый человек должен выбирать то, что ему нужно, то есть информация должна быть достаточно демократичной. Только в этом случае и в общении с людьми она станет добром для этого человека и приведет к прогрессу и так далее.
Information is only benign in a democratic situation of its free flow, where the individual can select from what is out there in the environment what he considers coincides with his aspirations and his values and so on.
Да, так я и сказал, собственно говоря, в своем проекте. То, что люди тонут, но единственное спасение они найдут на острове, общаясь друг с другом. И, собственно говоря, интеллектуальный рынок как таковой, он существует, и не важно там, что будут еще куча каких-то супер этих самых компьютеры, там еще какая-то новая техника. Суть, собственно говоря, информации в общении людей, она только тогда становится полезной и притворяется, как-то перерабатывается и идет.
What he says is the essence of that scheme is that empty information is empty information, that it only has any meaning when it has values attached to it and it means something to individuals.
Так думает Шаумин.
Что?
Так думает Шаумин.
That's his opinion.
Они думают,
что вы думаете?
А вот.
What do you think?
Мне никаким образом не хотелось связывать.
Если я говорю по-русски, вы сможете говорить по-английски.
Можно?
Нет.
Тяжело. Не хотелось бы никаким образом связывать наш проект ни с какой политикой и ни с гласностью, ни с перестройкой. Ни с гласностью, ни с перестройкой, потому что эта гласность и перестройка никак не повлияла на идею проекта.
He says quite reasonably that glasnost and perestroika were not such current themes at the time they did that project as they are now.
Я думаю, что пытаясь ответить на эту тему, мы бы сделали такой же проект и вне всякой гласности, если бы и не было гласности и перестройки.
They would have made the same statement even if those were not matters of current public debate.
Мы действительно думаем, что не только это, может быть, вы правы, что есть некая специфика российской жизни.
Maybe there are some specifics of Russian life.
В отказе от какого-то, от некой информации, но
which are concerned with the rejection of such bombardment with information.
Может быть, но я считаю, что мы считаем, что слишком много информации вредно не только в России, но и во всем мире.
It's their view that too much information is harmful not only in Russia but throughout the whole world.
Потому что, вот, например, этот проект мы сделали год или два назад, и буквально месяц назад из наших газет мы узнали о появлении некоего компьютерного вируса, который заразил сеть компьютеров где-то там на Западе, в Америке. Таким образом, мы можем себе представить, что через некоторое время вся информация, заложенная во всей этой системе, погибнет. И тогда действительно останется то, что мы считаем настоящей информацией.
Вот, значит, когда эти компьютеры совсем заполнятся информацией, ваша позиция будет вот
Нет,
сущность?
нет, то есть я вижу в этом подтверждение нашей мысли.
Я не понял это вирус.
Вы не поняли, что какая-то сейчас появилась какая-то болезнь компьютера. Вы знаете,
болезнь компьютера?
Да, о чем это есть? Нет?
Болезнь.
Какая-то плавающая какая-то компьютерная программа, которая уничтожает.
Yes. When computers go wrong, he says, when there is literally a malfunction. Yes.
И таким образом вся эта информация в компьютерах может быть очень просто уничтожена в один момент. Хотя...
I see. You're saying, how do you... There can come a moment when computers go wrong and all the information is actually...
Может уничтожить и людей. Но, в общем, нет, это может...
Когда вы говорите в микрофон.
Все проблемы решить за столом.
Заводка.
Ну, это, конечно, правильно, но что вы сказали, по-моему, это уже ответ, что есть в России такой дух.
Я сказал, может быть, есть.
Maybe there is.
Я не уверен.
He went so far as to say that there is such a spirit in Russia, and now would only qualify it and say maybe. No, спасибо.
Perhaps as we're nearing the 9 o'clock deadline, a rosebud banquet awaits our guests in the members' room, and we will be taking them up in a few moments. Perhaps it'd be fitting for me to try, first of all, to summarize some of the points made, and then to thank our visitors for coming and for displaying themselves upstairs with their drawings. Last night, in a very, very moving and beautiful speech in English, Sasha, as I've learned to call him, Brodsky, spoke of that fish, that beautiful fish, which is weighed down by the depths of the sea and is therefore flat and has certain configurations and coloring which save it from being devoured by larger fish, etc. And he also said that when such a fish comes out of its depth into approaching the surface, it might explode, its eyes might pop out, and so on. So that we are really, in a sense, as an audience, not able fully to grasp this context, this deep ocean that these guys seem to be in. We're not fully aware, perhaps Brian Hatton is, of the culture, if I can use that word, which is running in parallel with the work that they're doing, the films, the novels, the poems, the paintings, and so on. So we're slightly and casually unfair to the content, perhaps, that is contained in their work, which is not only to be demonstrated in their work, but in the pattern and streams and crossovers of the cultural milieu. I know you can't translate that, but try for a moment. Could you?
Well, I can't translate, sorry.
You don't? Just a little bit. Tell them that I'm aware, and I'm sure all of us are aware, how complex the world that you live in is, and that we are not entirely familiar with all the other artistic movements that are running parallel to what you're doing.
Говорит о том, что они понимают, что ситуация очень сложная в Советском Союзе, и существуют другие течения, о которых они не знают, и поэтому
just carry on. And with this awful language barrier which we have, it's very difficult for you to actually say what you mean and for you to understand some of the things that we're saying. So this
очень трудно объяснить при наличии языкового барьера то, что вы имеете в виду, и то, что мы имеем в виду.
Nevertheless,
но тем не менее,
what has been said by many of the speakers
все, что было сказано сегодня,
is simply that the work on exhibition and the attitudes and the replies to questions
да, работа на выставке и отношение к этим работам
are very hermetic. They are completely inward-looking.
Они смотрят в себя, нежели чем наружу эти работы.
And a preoccupation with the idea of art for art's sake.
И это искусство ради искусства.
Is not sufficient because all art has content.
Этого недостаточно, потому что искусство имеет содержание.
And so it is the art itself that is being questioned. What it is trying to say.
Да, и поэтому это искусство, то, что под допросом, что хотели сказать в своих работах.
It appears to us to be self-indulgent.
То есть нам-то кажется, что это как бы игра со своими проблемами.
Particularly at a moment when, from the outside of Russia, and I can't make the analogy with the deep sea, but there seems to be certain partings of the waves.
Да, особенно когда налаживаются связи между
a certain
Западом и
turbulence
Востоком.
in the environment and a certain potential for changing one's
Да,
posture.
то есть в Советском Союзе происходят изменения, он видит их как положительные, а вы отворачиваетесь. Понимаете, не хотите принимать участие в этом.
We speak from the outside, and we're extremely grateful
То есть мы говорим со стороны,
that
как посторонние.
that you would expose yourself as you have, and we hope that on a future occasion, in the very near future,
Но
some or all of you
мы надеемся, что в будущем
might visit us perhaps for a longer period and take part in the architectural debate which is possible in an institution such as this.
вы сможете приехать, возможно, на более продолжительное время и принять участие в дискуссии.
Thank you very much.
Спасибо.